This is worse than we thought. We're going to be talking about the recent injury update for Patrick Williams, and we're also going to be talking about the Chicago Bulls trade for Josh Giddy and if it could potentially already have failed for the Chicago Bulls. This is your host, Rico Greenhowe, and you found yourself on another episode of Bulls Digest. And so we are talking about Patrick Williams and Josh Giddy. There are a lot of questions going around both of these players. Obviously, with Patrick Williams, we were looking to see him possibly take another step. The Chicago Bulls went ahead and invested 5 years, $90 million into him. And the preseason, it is not looking good. On top of that, we have some more injury update news with him. And then with Josh Giddy. Josh Giddy came over from OKC after being benched. Looked like he had some limitations in his game. Right now, we are not seeing that he is pushing towards getting past those limitations. And so let's start with Patrick Williams and the latest update with him. And so this came out during halftime of yesterday's game with Casey Johnson. And I think this is something that maybe some people missed. But anyway, Patrick Williams apparently jammed his wrist. He had to get x-rays at halftime. And so it's something that he was able to play through. And I guess the good thing about this is that it is not the same wrist where Patrick Williams had missed time during the season and he had to get surgery. But it is another injury to Patrick Williams, and he is in the preseason. We haven't gotten to the season yet. And if you're familiar with the Patrick Williams situation, well, he's coming off an injury already due to his foot. And so, with Patrick Williams, I think that this is very concerning, okay? Because I have said this the last couple games, and I'm hoping that this is correct. But, I'm like, is Patrick Williams just rusty from just being out, all right? Because he hadn't really had a chance to play a lot of basketball since he went down with the foot injury, had to get the surgery and everything else. And you just wonder, is it something other than rust? Because we're talking about the same stuff with him, and we're talking about being aggressive and being assertive. And what's really got, I think, a lot of Chicago Bulls fans now worried is that one of his calling cards was knocking down the three ball, and he has not shot the ball well. And on top of that, they talk about his defense, and there have been times where it looks like he's been lost on the defensive end the last two games, and he's supposed to be maybe the Chicago Bulls' best defender. So now it just really makes me wonder because, all right, I had said this before that Patrick Williams is a player that we didn't know too much about going into this particular season in the sense with his injuries because, we saw Lonzo Ball, we saw his hype videos. We seen Zach LaVine and his videos as well. We saw Julian Phillips play in the Summer League and come back from his foot injury, but nobody saw Patrick Williams play fives out there. And what's more interesting about it is that AK and Billy Donovan were kind of quiet about it. And then you hear this report from Darnell Mayberry going into camp. I guess the Chicago Bulls had their mini camp, and he's reporting that he had a setback. Well, then when Patrick Williams gets to camp and during media day or whatever, he's saying, no, there was no setback. I've been playing fives. And then now when we see him on the court, I don't know what it is. Either he's still trying to work his way back or maybe there was a setback and the injury that he's coming back from was far worse than reported. Either way, it doesn't look like it's trending good, especially when you have a player like Modest Buzelis who has shown signs. I know he didn't play very well against Memphis, but I did talk about the fact that he still was aggressive at the end of the game and he didn't even particularly shoot well. And with the shot that he did hit, it actually almost helped the Chicago Bulls win the game. And so, I don't know if we would have saw that from Patrick Williams. And that's kind of the question that we're talking about is this assertiveness. And so very concerned about Patrick Williams. And I just wonder now when you look at this, and this is where it's like, okay, should we be worried or is this far worse than we think? we have went ahead and invested 5 years, 90 millions into Patrick Williams. And I talked about was in the top 10 as far as signings over the NBA this last season, as far as the money allocated out there. And I mean, he's making more than Isaiah Hartenstein, who got 3 for 87. You had Malik Monk, who got, I think, 4 for 78 million. Obi Toppin as well. And even another player in his class, Isaac Okoro, he's making far less, and he actually had the same production as Patrick Williams. And so if Patrick Williams has an injury that was far worse than what it was before, now you have to wonder, okay, can he even get back to where he was showing flashes? Because if he can't even get back to that point, and then we have this Patrick Williams, you have to ask yourself as a franchise, what do you do now? Because now you have Patrick Williams under contract, and then that would mean that he would turn into an asset that is not going to be movable and nobody would want. And then now you have to ask, okay, well, if you have him on contract, you have Kobe White coming up, you have Ayo coming up, you're going to need to go to the negotiation table with them, and then you still have Josh Giddy too. So these are very, very real things that the Chicago Bulls should be concerned about, and that's where to start with Patrick Williams. And so lastly, to end it, Casey Johnson notes that, well, he's had more turnovers than rebounds, and let's continue to monitor the situation. And I'm just saying, like, what else is there to monitor? I'm kind of wondering, like, is this it with Patrick Williams? I hope it's not. But yes, we're looking for him to hopefully show signs in this next game coming up against the Milwaukee Bucks if he does play, assuming he does with this injured wrist now that he has. And so next, let's move on to the next point, and that is going to be Josh Giddey. And so Josh Giddey, and now the question around him, and you're hearing this noise get a little bit louder as you start to look at some of the media that is covering this team here. They're talking about, did the Bulls fail already at this Josh Giddey trade? And I talked about the fact that the Bulls traded for Josh Giddey, and they're trying to trade for the fact that he's going to get to this untapped potential. And this untapped potential means that he becomes a better defender. It also means that he becomes a better three-point shooter as well. He's able to stretch the floor. Now, if you watched that game yesterday against the Memphis Grizzlies, you'll notice that there were times where the defense packed it in the paint and they just dared Josh Giddey to shoot. And on top of that, there were some times where Josh Giddey missed bunnies. Now, what I do like about Josh Giddey is he did look a little bit more fluid out there. He looks like he's starting to work back from that ankle injury. And he is filling the stat sheet, which we're going to talk about. He had 11, 7, and 7, but it was on a 3 of 10 performance, and he was 1 of 4 from downtown. And one of the things that I talked about with Josh Giddey is just why, in fact, he was benched, because I think that Josh Giddey might, in fact, run into the same situation that he had in OKC, where he could get benched. And I think that when you look at Ayo Dosunmu, you look at the fact that Ayo can play offense, you're not going to pack it in on him. And also defensively, you're not going to attack Ayo the same way because he is a better defender. If the team as a whole, plays more efficient on the offensive end and the defensive end, and Ayo is coming off the bench, you would have to think that, well, it makes more sense to start Ayo Dosunmu, who I think could have started before Josh Giddey was traded for. And the Chicago Bulls might be in a better situation or trending towards being even better long term than having to go ahead and trade off their best defender for Josh Giddey. And so digging a little bit more into Josh Giddey in this situation, a lot of people are going to say, yes, he put up the 11, 7, and 7, and he's almost close to a triple-double. And, it's always when he plays without SGA, and that's fine. Look, here's a stat for you that supports that. 16.9 points per game, 8 rebounds a game, and 7.3 assists a game. And they're trying to point out the fact that, yes, once he plays, obviously without SGA, then he's able to play better. But at what point do you say, well, it's just empty calories? Okay, because it's one thing to go ahead and fill the stat sheet. But if you are taking away from the flow of the game, if the defense is able to pack it in, and now we're playing 4-on-5 on that end, and then defensively, if you looked at the tape in the last two games, man, they have been going at Josh Giddy, and there are times where he just looks lost on the defensive end. And unlike where he was at in OKC, this is going to be a far worse situation because the Bulls don't have nearly as good a defense as OKC. So he is going to essentially be out there on an island, and there is nobody that can make up for those defensive lapses or mistakes. So it is going to look even worse. And so as we dig a little bit more, and the people out there that are wondering, okay, well, why was he benched? This is exactly what his coach had to say. It said to give the rest of the starters more space to work with. And this is going into that Mavericks series. And he's talking about Isaiah Joe, who is the better three-point shooter. It gives them more space and allows them normal attacks on the offensive end. So even if the Chicago Bulls get to a point where they start getting good again and become contenders, well, you can't have a player out there where the defense is going to just be able to sag off and pack it in. That is going to take away a lot of other things that you want to do, back cuts, pick and rolls, rotations, things like that. You don't have that because you have a player that essentially all he can do is slash, and that's about it. He's not giving you anything else on the offensive end. And so, this is another thing that I took a look at. This is on CBS Sports if you want to take a look at this. And I think it's great if you want to look at some film study as to what went on with Josh Giddey in that last playoff series that he played with them. But I took this particular piece from that article, and you can see the video that is on top of this. But his three-point percentage is at 31%. And they're talking about the fact that defenses are going to sag off that, and they're going to let you have that. But they talk about this one particular play, and you see it for yourself if you go to this article. Shai Gilgeous literally runs into three different people because they did not respect Josh Giddey from the outside. And so it doesn't matter how much you are of a playmaker, or how good you are as a playmaker, excuse me. But if you can't knock that shot down, you can't stretch the floor, it hurts the rest of the team. And so this is a situation where it could be far worse for the Chicago Bulls. And they might have lost this trade because Alex Caruso, it was reported that we were looking at maybe getting some multiple picks back from him. We didn't get any picks back from OKC. And I would have to say this, and this is one of the things that I've said, if we would have at least gotten one pick in this draft and kept our pick at a pick 11, so I'm assuming that we still had the opportunity to get Modest Buzelis, what if we would have been able to get an additional pick and get a player like Khalil Ware, right? Like that would have probably changed the way the roster is looking right now, and it could possibly change the outlook of this roster and how long it's going to take to rebuild or retool it. So anyway, let me know in the comments what you are thinking about these two players. Are you concerned? Do you think that this is, yes, in fact, far worse than what we thought initially when, we made this trade or when we re-signed Patrick Williams? Or do you feel like, hey, it's nothing to be concerned about? These two players are going to be some of the best players for the Chicago Bulls this season. Let me know what you're thinking in the comments. Once more, I want to thank everybody out there for liking, sharing, and subscribing to the videos. It means a lot to me as we try to reach 5,000 subscribers out there. I want to let you know that 64.2% of you that watch are not subscribed, so make sure you continue to mash on that subscribe button. And even though we are looking at some situations that could be very concerning to the Chicago Bulls moving forward, I'm still saying go Bulls, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.